Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. I'm so excited about our next guest. Our next guest made a video about her conversion to the Messianic Hebraic Roots lifestyle and spoke about her upbringing as a Muslim in her testimony, which is a great testimony, and I'll put that link below the video. But I've been waiting to get her on the Torah Life Ministries to talk about a topic that's been on my heart for a really long time. First, let's say hello to our guest, Sister Laura. Shalom, Sister Laura. How are you?
Shalom. How are you? Good, thanks. I'm doing well.
Very well, very well. I'm doing great. Thank you for being here. So for a long time, I grew up pretty much not into any belief system, even though my parents were Jewish. And from what you were saying in your testimony, you grew up in Islam, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you're very familiar with Islam.
Yes, it's fair to say I am.
Okay, and you've read the Quran and you're scripturally familiar with everything in the Quran, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's important for a guest to know, because what I'm going to ask you is, well, first give a little brief, for those of you that didn't see your testimonial video, give a little brief testimonial of your background. So, because I have some questions specifically about what you believe now in Yeshua and then what you believe then. So give a little background about yourself.
Okay. So yeah, I did grow up in a Muslim family. I was raised sort of moderate because my family's moderate. However, my views changed as I continued to be older, and my beliefs turned into what would now be considered radical or fundamental. Yeah.
And how long ago and what made you change?
I actually just stopped believing that Islam is true, that Allah is the true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I saw many flaws with the Quran as well, contradictions, and I sort of just left it all and decided not to follow it.
So with a background of Islam, a lot of the viewers, we just go by what we hear on the news today, but a lot of people don't really understand that Islam is not something that's as old as the Bible. It's more of a new thing, and this so-called Prophet Muhammad isn't necessarily the good person that it might seem in people's eyes that they're hearing about in the news. So just give us a little background on when Islam started compared to this Bible and so on, so people can just get a good background of it.
So Islam did start about 600 years after Christianity by Muhammad. And there are a lot of Muslims that do say that Muhammad is, this really peaceful, loving prophet who did miracles, who did all this stuff that is very inconsistent with the Quran. And people and Muslims as well say that, obviously Islam is peaceful, Islam is very tolerant, but that kind of is, couldn't be further from the truth. And even when you sort of do point Muslims or non-Muslims to passages of the Quran that state otherwise, they sort of still find it hard to believe. So, yeah.
Sure. Well, I know people that are of the Muslim faith, and they seem like very nice, kind, loving people. So why would you say that Islam is that's not true about Islam?
There are a lot of people who are nice and peaceful to some extent, and what you call moderate, my family included. But that's because they sort of choose to cherry pick the Quran. They choose to ignore some other scriptures that they don't necessarily like. And so they sort of make up their own lukewarm sort of religion of Islam.
Yes, you use the word lukewarm, and in Revelations, it gives a stern warning about Christians and being lukewarm. And you and I have a strong belief in the Bible, and people would call us legalists because we desire to stick to the guidelines and instructions of the Bible. And anyone that's less than that would be accepted by the world as good, loving Christians. But the Bible has what it says about lukewarm. So would you say these lukewarm Muslims are not adhering to their scriptures? to the Quran?
No, they're not fully, at least, because they do cherry pick and they choose to follow some things and, like I said, ignore the rest. But I think that's sort of, similar to lukewarm Christians as well. However, the Quran does clearly state that if you don't follow everything and you don't follow Prophet Muhammad and the teachings, you're not really considered Muslim. However, lukewarm Muslims don't really see that either. So it's a kind of a battle for them.
Now, for the sake of non-Muslims around the world, it's probably a good thing that these Muslims are lukewarm, because when you look at what the Quran says, now the Quran scriptures and verses, but I've always heard it said that, if you're not a Muslim, you're considered an enemy. There's nothing in between, and there's a way to deal with enemies. And the lukewarm Muslim might not even have read that scripture, because I assume that, like Christians, they're not reading their scriptures. But those that are obedient to the word are considered extremists and terrorists around the world. But in fact, they are being obedient to their scriptures, the Quran. Is that correct?
Yes, that's very correct. I think the radical Muslims and the fundamentalists are the true Muslims. However, lukewarm Muslims, excuse me, lukewarm Muslims actually kind of disagree with my view or other people's views. When we do say that radical Muslims are the true Muslims, they sort of say, no, we are the true Muslims. But it is, in my opinion, that the fundamentalists are the true Muslims, because they are literally following every single word of the Quran and Hadith and are very obedient to Allah.
And it's a very violent scriptures that calls for violence against anyone who's not a Muslim. Is that correct?
Yes, Jews, Christians are pretty much all unbelievers.
So can you give us an example of a verse that calls for violence against non-Muslims?
I don't want to say anything specific, but there are plenty of verses that do actually call for the killings of Jews and Muslims, anybody who doesn't really convert to Islam. There's variety of verses.
Now, you say Jewish people and Muslim and Christian people. According to Islam, besides Jewish people and Christian people, are there any other types of anything else out there? Does it specifically say in the Quran Jewish people and Christians, or does it say just anyone who's not Muslim? What does it say?
So there are verses that specifically do speak about Jews and Christians, but of course, all unbelievers who do not actually believe in Allah.
Okay. So how old were you when you stopped following Islam?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I was, can't exactly remember on the top of my head, but I converted to Christianity. It was around December 2011, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay, so when you made this conversion, first of all, what did your family think of it?
I actually got disowned when they actually found out. When I first converted, I tried not telling them. I sort of kept quiet. However, my dad found out from someone else. And later I found out that he wasn't actually mad at me for converting, but he was mad because I didn't actually tell him myself, and he heard it from other people. So he was kind of embarrassed. However, my grandparents ended up also disowning me as well, telling me to leave. So even though they are moderate Muslims and my dad was pretty much an atheist, they took it pretty hard, because they were actually, I think, more worried about what will people, outside and the community really think and say.
What about your so-called friends or people that you spend time with? Did they support your decision? Were they against it? Was anyone violent towards you in either their words or their actions when you made this conversion?
So some of my friends were a bit upset, and there are some friends now, or that I've had that I considered best friends, who I don't actually speak to anymore. And then some friends obviously, don't care. And I think those ones that didn't care are the ones that weren't necessarily practicing. And when I first converted, I did have some threats from family members. and, family, friends. But that was due to me sort of not preaching at them, but I did have moments where, I was telling them, if they don't convert and they don't leave Islam, that they're going to hell. So I think it was due to that mostly as well. But I did get also some messages from family members who, were saying, how dare you, convert and leave Islam, and how dare you, embarrass your family, after everything that they've done for you. So yeah, stuff like that. It was a, no-win situation, I suppose.
Now, you live in a part of the world that is not, I mean, it might be an Islamic neighborhood, but it's not an Islamic country, so to say. What do you think with this conversion, if you did live in an Islamic country, how would you be treated?
Oh gosh, if I did live in a, Islamic country, with, especially if it's a country with Sharia law, I would probably be executed, beheaded, all the rest. So I would not be alive.
Okay. And do you have any fear at all now about proclaiming Yeshua as Messiah, and also talking of the truth about Islam? I mean, you don't say anything that's not true about it, but do you have any fear at all about any of the violence that comes against people that have converted in the past?
No, I don't have any fear at the moment because, I am living in Australia, and, so far, Muslims don't own Australia. And there are many people out there also speaking up. So no, I don't have any fear, no. So what was the second part of the question?
Oh, no, just based where you are. Do you have any fear? Okay, so now, what would your message be to Muslims, especially young Muslims your age? What would your message be to them that are maybe they're lukewarm Muslims now, or maybe they're even extreme Muslim, but they're missing something. They don't feel fulfilled or completely fed spiritually. What would your message be to them?
I have had messages to them, and that's the reason I'm also doing these videos, speaking out against Islam, in hopes of maybe them, opening their eyes and hearts to the truth. However, Muslims are also taught that they shouldn't be asking any questions, because if they do start asking questions, then they will doubt Islam. So it is pretty hard to maybe, for the time being at least, reach any of them, because they are sort of not wanting to hear. And they obviously do have fear as well. So, yeah.
Now, you did mention something called Sharia law. Explain a little about what that is.
Sharia law is Islamic law. It is pretty much enforced in Islamic countries for the most part. So some of Sharia law can be like, for instance, if you are caught stealing, the consequence for that would be cutting off of hands. If you're caught in adultery or fornication, you're beheaded or stoned. So yeah, it's pretty much Islamic law. Like, they tell you what you can and can't do, and if you do cross that line, you obviously are having to face consequences.
And how are these upheld in the Islamic countries in terms of do they have to put the sentence often, or do you just have nobody that steals there? Or is it something that happens often where it's actually carried out?
In some countries, it is definitely carried out from what I've heard and what I've seen. But I think when you do have, these kind of laws in place and the punishment is very dire, people are going to, perhaps stay away from committing these Islamic crimes.
Sure. And now, not all of these laws or these Sharia laws are necessarily evil or anything. That's there are some that are quite biblical in what they're saying. Is that correct?
I do agree with that, yes.
And your videos, you often say some of the things that Islam promotes, you are in agreement with in terms of Sharia law, and you've been accused of still being a Muslim because of that. So what would you say to something like that?
Yes, I have been accused of still being a Muslim due to some of my, I suppose, views and beliefs in Islam. And as I said, even in this morning's video, as much as I do disagree with Islam and Allah and Muhammad, and as much as I do think, it is of the devil, there are some things that in Islam I do find beautiful, such as modesty. Just also the fact that some practicing and fundamental Muslims respect their God, Allah. I think that's really quite beautiful. They're extremely obedient, following every single word of Allah, despite, Allah being evil and, the Quran not being the true word of God. So things like that, I think more people, if they were like the fundamental Muslims in their obedience and fear, in God, I think it would make, a big difference even to us as believers.
Sure. Well, we know that in Christianity and other belief systems around the world, there are many different types or sects, you say, of Christianity. You got Pentecostal, you got Baptist, and all of these. When it comes to Islam, is it, well, no matter where you go, whatever mosque you go to around the world, they're all going to believe the same thing, or do you have many, many different beliefs of that?
Yes, so there is a lot of sects even in Islam. The three major, obviously, are Sunni Islam, Shia, and Sufi. Shia and Sufi Islam is sort of, them two are similar, whereas Sunni Islam seen more as fundamental and radical. Shia Islam and Sufi are more mystical. They believe in a lot of Gnosticism, just spiritual things. So, for instance, with Sunni Islam, it's very strict. You can't listen to music, you can't, do a lot of things, whereas Sufi and Sunni Islam incorporate music into their worship and believe that music is a way that they get closer to Allah. So yeah, there's a lot of sects.
What part were you of when you were growing up?
Sunni Islam, the first one, the very strict one.
Okay. And with that, what other, so if I have a difference with a Christian about the Sabbath or something, we have a difference, we have a conversation. But is it true in Islam that Muslims are not only killing Jewish people and Christian people, but they're also killing each other? Muslims killing Muslims. It's quite common from what we see in the news. Is that in the Quran, whatever, to that Muslims should kill Muslims, or like where did that come from?
Yes, so they are actually killing Muslims as well as non-Muslims. So the fundamentalists, radical Muslims, are actually, for the most part, killing Shia Muslims because there is a lot of difference in belief. And yes, it does say in the Quran, that hypocrites that are moderate Muslims pretty much need to pretty much be killed as well because they are not considered Muslim. So I think the fundamental Muslims are taking that literally. So they are sort of starting now, or have always really been killing Muslims as well.
Sure.
As they don't actually believe that Shia Muslims are, the actual followers of Islam.
Sure. Now, does one person have an opportunity to convert at that point? So like you said, you were of the Sunnis before, I know like in Islam, like when they go and they do their attacks, they always they say either convert or die, convert or die. Is that a rule in the Quran that says they have an opportunity to convert before they're killed, or are they just told out to go and kill?
Yes, there is a verse in the Quran that states that they are to be given a chance to convert, and if they don't, then you can either behead them or kill them, or whichever way you choose.
So it's almost like an evangelism tool, death or Islam.
Exactly, convert or die.
And do they do that with the Muslims as well? If it's a Muslim of a different type, to convert to our type or die, or same way? Yes,
and even apostates as well.
Okay, and now in terms of these terrorist groups that seem like they're everywhere these days, what do you say about them? Like we discussed earlier, they're just following the Quran and they're doing what they should be doing according to the Quran. But
yes,
how do lukewarm Muslims feel about them?
Lukewarm Muslims don't like them at all. They don't consider them to be true Muslims. Lukewarm Muslims think that they are the true Muslims because they believe that Islam is peace and Islam is tolerant and Muhammad is this great and wonderful guy. So yeah, terrorists and fundamentals aren't seen as true Muslims by the lukewarm moderate.
Sure. And as being a believer in Yeshua, what would you say is from Muhammad to Yeshua, the difference? What do you notice is the big difference in your life now that maybe you weren't experiencing at that point?
There is a big difference with Muhammad and Yeshua. I don't think that even really kind of deserves, well, Muhammad doesn't really even deserve really a mention.
Well, the question really is in you, like in your heart, like what's the difference been for you in terms of, I guess, maybe the feeling or the reality of what one makes you feel, what one did or didn't, because you obviously switched one out for the other. So how do you feel living as a Muslim? Did you always feel oppressed? Did you feel like you had to look over your shoulder or anything like that? And how do you feel now as a believer of Yeshua? Do you have similar feelings, or do you feel completely free? Like what goes on in your mind?
So when I was a practicing Muslim, I actually didn't feel oppression or fear, because I considered myself, fundamentalist. I always thought, and I still think, like if you're going to do something, you're going to be either all in or all out. So when I was a Muslim, I didn't feel oppressed. There was no fear because I too was believing in Allah. I was believing in what he wanted us to do. So I was sort of following that wholeheartedly.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Well, when you see ISIS and these other terrorist companies like Boko Haram and all these other terrorist organizations around the world taking women as hostages and sex slaves, and some of them already have one wife, and I've heard stories about other wives being there. I mean, do you think, like, what do you think goes on in the mind of these female Muslims, whether they're a wife and there's another woman in the house that's a slave or something? Do they just accept it as, well, this is Islam, and they feel like this is fine and it's okay, or do they have an issue with it but they're just oppressed?
I think it depends with each female. Some females, like I said, like myself, who accept it all, because you do have a healthy fear of Allah, and you do want to do everything to obey Him. However, there are obviously some females who are forced into many things. Even wearing the hijab, praying for the most part. So they obviously would have issues, but not necessarily voice them, in fear of perhaps punishment or death.
So from your experience, for people that are obedient to the Quran, is there any compassion at all on anyone who's not a Muslim?
If you're actually practicing fundamental Muslim, no, there's no compassion. They might fake it for a while, especially out in public or in social situations. They might pretend to be nice, but in their hearts is a totally different story. So I don't think there's no genuine nice feelings from them.
Okay, well, thank you for this amazing insight into Islam, and for being brave enough to come on out here and talk about it. And it's exciting to know, because I've interviewed people over the years who've made that conversion, and it's just a great thing. Now, did somebody witness to you? Like, how did you hear about Yeshua at first? Like, were you a little kid? Were you older? Did you see some videos? How did that change happen?
Well, I came to convert, first to Christianity because of my mother, actually. She kind of left when I was 4.5, and I met her when I was 21. So I think I kind of converted maybe when I was 23, around that age. And she had actually told me that 12 years prior to meeting her, she had converted to Christianity, and she told me about, Jesus, or what I called him Jesus back then. And so I think she played a big part in my conversion and sort of looking into the Bible and reading it. So, yeah.
And anyone that's interested in your story, you have a very lengthy testimonial on your YouTube page and some other videos about these topics. And there's going to be some more topics that I want to interview another time. Things about Sharia law, things of modesty, and some other things that are really on my heart that I don't necessarily see as bad things all the time, but So we could talk about them in the future, and I want to encourage everyone to get to Laura's YouTube page and check out our videos. The links is below the video. Laura, thank you for being on the show, and it's been a pleasure to have you. Yahweh bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show as well.
Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways. Torah Life Ministries, come out of the world.